Well, the number of women in power at Australia's top companies went backwards in the past year. At this rate, it's going to take 100 years for women to make up at least 40% of all CEO positions at ASX 300 companies. Sam Mostyn, the Chief Executive Women President, joins us live more. Sam, I appreciate your time. I see representation of women at the top. The leading public companies went backwards this year and also last. How is this happening in the 2020s?
Well, nice to join you, Ashley, here from the CEW conference where we're discussing exactly this. And it goes backwards because so many of our ASX 300 companies either haven't set targets, haven't done the work to create environments where women can thrive, and have effectively just given up on the talent that is available to them. Conversely, the companies that have done this well and have set great targets and have seen increases in women in their teams are some of our highest performing companies at the top of the ASX 100. So, you know, there's a lot to think about here at a time when the government is saying that women's workplace participation and women leadership to help us get through the economy we face is really vital. There's a lot of work to do in a number of companies to lift their game on women's leadership.
And Sam, are we just talking about CEOs here, or when you look at leadership teams, are women doing better when it comes to being a part of the executive team at least? Are there women in those senior positions?
Sadly, they're not. So one of the reasons we see a decline or a complete stalling of women into CEO positions is the lack of women in the jobs that actually do go into the CEO position. We know that if you're not in a line role or a CFO in that C-suite, that you're not promoted or not considered as part of the succession for the CEO. So we've seen a decline in women sitting in those roles, particularly since COVID. We've got less companies in the ASX 300 today that have women in those positions. And we have more companies in the ASX 300 who have no women in their executive teams at the moment. So that number has grown. That's one of the biggest concerns, I think, the complete absence of women in a number of our ASX 300 companies.
I assume some industries are worse than others. Are you ready to call some of them out?
Well, look, we've done that, I guess, in the report and shown where those industries are. There's good news. There's good news in some of the tech sectors and services, but the really bad ones are still those that have had some persistent problems with women in their organisations. And sadly, for those industries that have got the most highly feminised workforces, like healthcare, we've seen those a number of companies in the ASX going backwards in the care sector with no women in many of their leadership teams and certainly no women CEOs in the ones we've looked at. So, you know, in terms of a country that's relying heavily on its care sector, that has an almost exclusively women's employment base, there's something going wrong in the ways in which those companies are just not supporting women into careers as opposed to holding them in jobs that don't take them anywhere near the top.
So, Sam, what role does government have to play in all of this? With this new Labor government now in power, is it time for them to intervene more at some level?
Well, we've said there are three groups that need to do a lot more. Government is one of those groups, and it's a very good start to hear the language of the government and the very high number of women in the cabinet. And Katie Gallagher, as Minister for Women and Minister for Finance and Minister for the Public Service, is a great example of where that language has changed and where, in fact, the APS is one of the higher performing of women in senior leadership. So they've given commitments to keep looking at the public service to encourage women and promote more women into senior leadership positions. But the government can also have tougher corporate reporting standards, and they can use their procurement policies to put a carrot out for those companies that have done well, and conversely suggest to those that have not done so well that they'll miss out on some of those goods and services that are bought by government. There's a big role here for investors as well, Ash, that investors can actually call for these companies to commit to the 40-40 pledge and to move and set targets that are meaningful and accountable for their companies to ensure that they continue to be invested in. And there's, of course, lots of call out today for the companies themselves to set targets, make them meaningful and accountable, and sign up to the 40-40 pledge and show that they are actually investing in their women's talent and showing that they can understand that having women at the top of organisations in equal numbers and in a respectful way is one of the best ways to reduce risk in those companies, reputational risk, and to understand their customer base better, their employee base better, and to attract greater investment interest. So we've really come out and said to all three groups today, there's more that everyone can be doing.
We heard a lot about gender equality at the Jobs and Skills Summit last week in Canberra, but it doesn't sound like the government feels it's in a position to bring forward childcare changes in the upcoming budget or make any moves for that matter when it comes to delivering on more generous paid parental leave schemes. Is that understandable considering the budget constraints we all know exist, or do you think that those changes would pay for themselves?
Look, I think listening to your program today, you can hear that there is enormous pressure, fiscal pressure on the government, and there is a fiscal envelope in which the budget is being constructed. I believe, and a number of people right across the economy, from the ACTU to the Business Council, ourselves and others, have said that this bringing forward childcare is actually a very smart thing to do, that it repays very quickly, that it's an investment, not a cost. And we had hoped to see maybe that coming forward to January, but the Treasurer has been quite clear that that is a commitment that starts in June, July next year. Certainly the Women's Economic Equality Task Force will be looking at these kind of issues further out than the October budget, and I imagine that we'll be doing a lot of work to show that there are many investments that government can make alongside others that have this huge economic return, really significant returns that we can commit to, including paid parental leave and superannuation on leave, a number of those things. So, you know, childcare, I would love to see it come earlier, as would many more, but we do understand the fiscal constraints of the government at the moment.
Sam Mostyn, really appreciate your insights. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll let you get back to your conference. Thank you.